James. Hello. I'm here with the Western Edge Broad Spectrum, and I have two paintings of flowers right behind me.
Tell me about your work.
Lately, I've been doing a lot of flowers, and I set up a challenge to myself because flowers are sort of cliche and a bit hackneyed as a subject. So I set up a challenge to try to make the flowers anthropomorphic, sort of human, and so they would have personality. And also, I did a lot of work with bees previously, sort of activist art about the disappearing bees. So you'll find some bees in this one painting of the two flowers kissing. I do a lot of echinacea flowers because they almost look like they've got heads on them. The pollen area, it sort of looks like a head, and it almost looks humanoid. So I've been doing a lot of echinacea and daisies. The other one is painted on copper. That's the horizontal one. And I love the copper. It's super smooth, a wonderful texture to paint on. It also lasts, doesn't peel. It's very durable. And it's just fun for me to work with the color of the copper, which shines through sometimes. But I always like the quote that talking about art is like dancing about architecture. It's pretty hard to do because people need to project their own meaning onto it. Anything that's a personal expression, for me, it's something that comes from deep within. I want it to be something that communicates, but also the viewer can also put meaning onto it. So I'm not being didactic. I'm not imposing my meaning onto it. Yes. Sure. Art is just a personal expression. It comes from within. It shouldn't be laid out for people. It should be, I think, something that's easily interpreted by the viewer and not didactic, so that the artist doesn't impose the meaning. So it's almost like whatever the person wants to project onto it, the meaning.
Look at somebody else's art.
Yes.
Other art. Strategy, how you look at it, like if you want to be emotionally affected, are you looking at it graphically? How do you evaluate or how do you look at art?
Of course, being an artist, I look at the technique a lot, and I think I appreciate what the work that was put into it. Like Dorothy's painting behind you. So much technique involved, so meticulous. I appreciate how many hours that takes. So I look at the technique, but I also look at the meaning. But I think art should be something that you can live with, and it should be slightly decorative, that you could have it in your house and it's not too negative. I think the art that's negative belongs in a museum. You know, the really edgy stuff that, you know, whether it's political or psychological. But it should be something that's beautiful. And that is a word that is not accepted in the New York art world. It's kind of considered very passé, probably, to say beautiful. And I think it should be beautiful. And it should be something you can live with.
Well, when you say something you live with, I'm not necessarily saying you're going to take it. You could buy it. You might see it in a museum.
Yes, in a museum you could see it. or even in a gallery. You know, you can still enjoy the art. But I think if it's going to be in your home, then it can't be heavy duty. It can't be ponderous. It can't be confrontational. I mean, you don't want to wake up in the morning and have your coffee and be confronted by some black blob or something, you know. So that's my own opinion.
I'm Cynthia Martin, and my work has always been about the landscape and environment around me. I have always reacted to its beauty and when it's threatened. For instance, when the developers came, as I was growing up in the San Fernando Valley, when the oil spills happened, and with climate change, it's been very important for me to express my anger about the political inaction. And so I've done several pieces with that. I'm not interested in plein air landscape painting, so I found one way of abstracting the landscape. This piece here is called Time Lapse, and I've used the sky as a metaphor for different moods in politics and culture and in the environment itself. And it could be from from dawn till dusk, but it could also be over several months, years, and you can read anything you want into it. I like to hook people with beauty, and then perhaps they'll get the point or sock it to them with a message. My second piece here in the gallery is called Breach, and it's about, I did it during 2015 when we had the Plains All-American oil spill off the Gaviota coast. It could also stand for the Montecito mudslide, which, by the way, recently had its 5th year anniversary. So the middle panel, black, could stand for many things, including climate change, again, or an oil spill or a mudslide. So the third piece that I have in the show is called Time Span, and again referring to the defilement of the landscape, but also over years, over time.
Okay.
So,
could I ask you, how would you define, and stand right about there,
Okay.
How would you define what is art?
well, if you're
Oh, I'm
referring,
sorry, let me focus
Okay.
here. Yeah. So how do you define what art is?
well, for me, it's about making a statement, whether it's blatant or subtle. But going
Blatant
back,
or what?
blatant or subtle, but going back to even the Renaissance, they discovered new ways of painting realism. And then it became the thing to do for a couple of centuries. In the 20th century, the abstractionists came, the abstract expressionists were using color and line and shape to express emotions, which of course weren't, this wasn't done until the 20th century. And then with postmodernism, I think most artists that have existed for the last 40 or so years have been trying to make a statement whatever style they want to use. And it's so wonderful to be an artist now because you can pick and choose from any style you want. You know, you can choose the style or the tool that does the job for the point you want to make.
Well, when you look at art, other people's art, do you have a strategy of how you try to appreciate something? Do you want to react emotionally? Or
Well, of course, I react to the skill that carries out, but it's got to have a point. So I also look for the statement, the visual statement they make. And I think, speaking of that, I think many of the artists in this show have done just that.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
If it's expression, if it's somebody's expression of from themselves, that they get to figure out how to create something that other people can see and feel. What do you think? But I don't think that doing it all by yourself and nobody ever sees it. I mean, it's still art, but it's really hard that way. So it's really nice if you get feedback and have your art up on the wall. Yeah, I think so. I think it is still art. Because there's so many artists that have that. And I have drawers full of art that nobody sees that are still art. I'm sorry, yes. Well, you know, when I create the art, it's very intuitive. I don't have a concept that I want to express. It just happens. It comes from my photography, and then I end up scanning and working in Photoshop and see what happens and combine pictures and paint them. And so, what did you ask me? Oh, okay. Other people's art. Well, I want to be engaged by it. I want to stop and look at it and want to look at it for a long time. So so it has a lot to do with feeling. It's hard to hear you. I want a piece of art that engages me, that stops me in my tracks, that makes me feel something good, bad, positive, negative, but I prefer positive. And that's what I'm looking for. I want to be grabbed. Good.
Anything else you'd like to say about art?
Anything else I want to say about art? I think it's a really important part of our culture to have artists and art, and that we need to support all the artists we can. What you're doing, I'm sure, is part of that. Going to art openings, buying art, reading about art, caring about it, you know, you care about movies, you care about music, you care about art.
So you're saying it's important.
I'm Veronica Walmsley, and I did this series here, the Free to Be Me series. It's color pencil and watercolor. And it was conceived basically out of the Carl Jung book, A Man and His Symbols. It's about the collective unconscious and the anima and the process of individuation. So the balance of male and female energy within the person and across the world. So that's the concept, the idea behind these. Yeah.
Is that the idea behind most of your works, or just this one?
Actually, just this particular series, yes. Yeah.
What would you say makes art art? Like, does anything qualify itself as art, or any thoughts? What's art?
I think true art reaches the human condition. It speaks about life experience and human experience in a way that we can all understand and appreciate. The symbols change from artist to artist and piece to piece, but I think what makes great art is when it resonates with people on a really human scale. You think about Joe Cocker and singing. I mean, Joe Cocker's voice is not that great, but his essence and his spirit is fantastic. And I think true art is the same, comes across the same way. Yeah, we're doing it in visual terms. He was doing it vocally.
The other question is, when you look at other people's art, do you have any strategy how you look at art? Like, is it when you're emotionally involved, or you look at it graphically, technically? What's your strategy when you look at art? What do you look at?
I think when I look at art, I'm looking for the message. I like layers of messages and metaphorical work. My work is metaphorical. So that's the kind of art that typically grabs me. You know, there's a deeper meaning there somewhere. It's the artist's essence that is being presented to you.
Very nice. And is there anything you don't like about art?
I can't think of a thing I don't like about art.
What makes art art? For me, art is a visual way of communicating. And I enjoy art when there's a message, when there's a reason. Sometimes it could even just be for the beauty of it. But for me, it's important to have a message, something that you visually want to get across, and you don't want to say it any other way. The first thing I do when I look at a piece of art is I look at it as art, as the composition, the colors, the relationship of the forms, the parts, the whole, how it holds together, just visually. The next thing I do is I try to understand what is it that this artist wants to say. And usually it becomes pretty clear when I stop and think about it.
Anything else you'd like to say about art?
I think the world needs more beautiful art in the world, because art makes us happy. Art is a way of sharing. It's a way of communicating across all cultures, all religions, all languages. It's universal. Art is a beautiful thing. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have art in my life every day.
My name is R.T. Livingston. I'm a multimedia conceptual artist. I'm laughing because there's so much noise around me. I came to California originally in 2003. I was brought here by the Santa Barbara Commission for the Arts. And I kept coming back. I did a couple of film festivals with Robin Bissio. And then by 2006, I decided to move here. And since that time, I've been working on various projects. In 2009, I became interested in painting the sea. And what you see behind you is a manifestation, my latest manifestation of that series. It's called the CIC. I use code in the process. I use the capital C, a small I because I shrink the ego, and then another capital C. And it's code for what I'm looking at, which of course is the CIC. This particular iteration has 3/4 water, which essentially is the amount of water on the face of the earth. And it's about clean air and clean water, without which we cannot survive on this planet for all species. So another aspect of it is that it really is very calming to paint water and to observe it over and over. I've done videos, I've written music about it, I've done all kinds of paintings and drawings of water and its relevance in our world. I've also done a lot of other things. I've written a couple of rock operas. One is called The Purgatorio, based on Dante's Purgatorio. The other is called Lazar. It's a sci-fi morality play. And I am very interested in sound and video and installation. And painting is sort of my foundation that I go back to just to dip into those waters, those traditional waters. And that's about everything I have to say right now.
Very well put. May I ask you, what makes art art?
It has to do with the intention of the artist. If the artist says it's art with intention, then it's art. This is not a value judgment. You may say, well, I don't like it. Well, that's okay. So it's a great deal of art, and a great deal of art criticism really has to do with personal taste. Another thing is it has to do with point of view. The artist has, everyone has a point of view. My point of view is different from Larry's, who's looking at me with a light flashing in my eyes. His point of view is me and and two of my paintings. Pardon me?
A lovely looking lady.
Oh, thank you very much. So it has to do with point of view, and then not just what we're looking at, but what we're thinking about. Those two things. What's getting us? Whether it's just a beautiful scene, whether it's something that a point we want to get across, whether it's a political issue, it's all based on the artist's point of view and the artist's intention to communicate. If art is about nothing else, it's about communication. And the artist, first of all, communicates with him or herself, and then with the audience, and ultimately, the audience always finishes the work. For me, it's a vibration. There's just something that hits me that I can't really put in words, but I know it's there. That doesn't mean that if that doesn't happen, that I don't appreciate the work. I do. But there's something, what happens to me when I see a piece that really resonates is that I want to go and I want to create something. Oh, no, not like anything. In a way, I'm an outlier. I do not base my work on anything else other than what I have absorbed over the years, which is a lot. I'm also an art historian. So but I do, I'm a trained artist, so I do look at composition, I look at color, I look at balance, I look at all of those things. But when a piece hits me, it's just something that goes right to the gut, to the heart, and to the head. And usually, there's some message for me that I get from a piece of art. It's a motivating thing.
I hear you so much better on headphones. I was just curious the difference. Lastly, are you able to describe your own art in any way?
My work bounces between the sublime and the ridiculous. This is an example of the sublime. I've done all kinds of things. I've done performance art. That's really wacky. I've done performance. I've done music. It goes all over the place. But there's always a thread that links to the environment in some way. That doesn't mean that I'm drawing pictures of water all the time. It could have to do with a message that I'm sending. For example, I was in a show last year called The Tipping Point, and I did a video, and I wrote a piece of music that was on display with the video called Leaders Blinded, and it had to do with climate change and the fact that our leaders are really not stepping up to the plate in quite the way they should in order to completely mitigate. Of course, it can't be completely mitigated anymore, but to mitigate the situation that we're facing.
And lastly, is there anything else you'd like to say about art?
I would like to say a lot about art, but let me just end it with this. The creative process, including what we call art, is a way of problem solving. Art is all about problem solving. And the creative process doesn't limit itself just to art making. You could be an accountant, and the creative process could be at work for you. Very often is. Or any profession. It's thinking differently. It's thinking out of the box, but not so far out of the box that you can't be understood. So there's a lot to say, but one of the biggest things is that it's very healing. And it's healing in this time of trouble that we're facing right now throughout the world.
Healing to the artist or the viewer?
It's to both. It's a very healing. For example, painting these paintings is a very healing experience for me in terms of my knowledge of where we're headed. And so just this repetition, this meditative practice is very healing. But it's also healing for those who are observing it, that it brings a sense of calm. The creative process is probably the greatest gift that each of us has been given. And it's important, not essential, but it certainly is a big factor in our lives if we can dip into it and really own that process. One more time. The whole thing? The creative process is inherent to us as humans, not only our species, but to other species as well. But it's part and parcel of who we are. It makes us human. We're able to create, we're able to think, we're able to solve problems. The creative process is a problem-solving process, but in that process, it's also very healing. It takes us to a place of calm. It takes us to a place of protest sometimes. It allows us to communicate in unique ways, unlike any other way that we can think of.